Hi everybody, Steve here, Biographics, and you can hear my printer going in the background. I wanted to go live, and I don't have a whole lot going on here right now that I can show you that I haven't showed you already, so I figured I'll just sit here and talk a little bit and share with you a little bit about what I've been thinking here the last couple of weeks actually. And as a graphic designer, pretty much all I do is arrange letters and numbers and shapes and colors all together to create designs, graphics, and signs and banners and stickers and all that kind of stuff. So if I break it down to really simply, what I do is that's it. I just move letters and numbers around, and I make signs and graphics using shapes and colors and all those sorts of things. And it got me thinking about what written language is all about, and how it even works, and how it even makes any sense. It's one of those things we just kind of take it for granted because we read signs, or we read some truck lettering or whatever on a door, and we just understand what it says because we learned to read when we were younger. And so you just look at those shapes that we call letters, and those shapes are all put together to form what we call words, and then those words convey a message to us as we read them. And I just think it's really neat how written language, or how especially written language incorporated into graphic design, how it works, like how our brains even comprehend what we're looking at. And to give you an example, when you look at shapes, you have your basic shapes like a square or a circle or a triangle, and then combinations of those shapes all combined together. You can create all kinds of other shapes, and some abstract shapes and just weird kind of shapes. But letters and numbers that we see written on a piece of paper, they're basically just shapes too. Now, a letter, for example, the letter E, okay? So a letter E is shaped like that, okay? That's just a shape that we call that shape an E, okay? A letter E, at least in the English language, right? And that shape that we call a letter represents a sound. So the letter E, depending on how it's being used in a word, could represent a sound like E, the sound E, or the sound eh, depending on what letters are around it. And another example might be the letter S, and a letter S is basically just a shape like that, okay? Kind of squiggly, and depending on the style or the design of the graphic that I'm doing, I may want to do a big bold outline of a shape that looks like what we call the letter S. And again, that shape represents a sound. So when we see that shape, our brain tells us that shape means the sound S. Okay, the letter S sounds like S. Okay. How about the letter Y? The letter Y is shaped like this, right? It's basically a triangle, an upside down triangle maybe, okay, with a little line at the bottom. We call that shape the letter Y, and sometimes that Y can have the same sound as the letter E, or it might sound like the letter I. And it just depends on the word that you might be using it in. Another good example of a shape that we call a letter, that when we see it in a sentence or in a word, is the letter H. It's just two straight down lines and one line across the middle, and we call that shape the letter H. And that H has a certain sound that it represents. That letter, that shape, has a sound that it represents, and it's like when you exhale, okay? And we know this. When I'm talking about this stuff, it's like it seems so stupid and juvenile and simple. But when you're learning to read, and when as a young child, learning your letters and the shapes of the letters and what sounds the letters make, a child is basically just learning shapes, and then they recognize that shape as a letter, and that letter represents a sound, and then combinations of those sounds all create words. It makes me think of, when we look at old ancient text, like Egyptian hieroglyphics and things like that. We look at that and we think, how could someone read that, or make a story out of that, or create a language out of that? Basically, all they are is just shapes, drawings, different combinations of lines and dots and patterns that represent either a word, a thought, an idea, and we call that hieroglyphics, or different types of graphics like that. In English language, we use letters to represent sounds that create words and sentences and all that kind of thing. It's no different. And this is how I think of letters whenever I'm creating a graphic or designing something. The style of letter, we refer to it as a font. So a different style letter represents a different feel, or it can tell a little bit different of a story. The style of the letter, the font. Some certain fonts go with certain designs and look nice, and some don't. And that's one of the fun parts of my job, is figuring out what letters and what font styles and lettering styles and what shapes of letters go with each other in the overall design of a sign or a graphic. So the letter H is a pretty simple letter. The E could have several different sounds to it, same as the Y. The S could have, we think of the letter S having the S sound. But if you put a combination of letters together in a certain way, so for example, the letter C right there, the letter C could sound like a K, the K sound, or it could sound like an S, the S sound. But you put it next to an H, and that combination of shapes, the C and the H shape, creates the sound ch, okay? Just like in the word cheesy. And if you look at this, you might think this whole video here is a cheesy thing to talk about. That's why I picked that word, because I just want to have a little play on words. But if you have two of these shapes together, it will never make the sound eh. It'll never make a short E sound. Two E's together will always make the long E sound. E. Okay? And that's something that, if you're learning the English language, that's something that people have to get accustomed to and used to. Same way with combining shapes of these letters creates a whole different sound. And combining the letter S in a word like this, it changes the sound of that letter S. So now no longer does it sound like an S, it sounds like the letter Z. Cheesy. All right? And that's what makes language and learning language kind of difficult. It can be fun and challenging, but especially the English language. I heard somewhere that the English language is one of the hardest languages to learn, because there's so many strange, weird combinations of letters that make different sounds depending on the combination that those letters are within the word. It makes it very difficult to learn to read, especially as an adult, as a second language. But basically, this is what I do. This is how my mind works, how my mind puts things together. I don't look at words and letters as what we typically think of them as words and letters. I think of them as shapes, and combination of those shapes creates a design, a pattern, something that's pleasing to look at, that tells a story. And that's what graphic design is really all about, combining shapes, which we call numbers and letters, with other shapes, and all that together with color, all creates a feel, a graphic, a brand, a logo, whatever it is that you want designed. That's what it's based off of. It's based off of basic written language and simple shape designs. So I just thought you might find that interesting. I know it seems really simple and juvenile, like I said before, but that's really what our language is based on. And I just find it interesting to really break things down and into its super simple, basic format. It helps me to build up a graphic from the get-go, from the start, and hopefully I can make some decent looking graphics and designs, because I think it through maybe way too much. So that's it for today. I'm gonna take off and finish up my day. My job that I'm printing here is almost done, so I'm gonna get that job finished up, and then I'll be back in the shop again tomorrow. So if you don't know, you can check out my website at graphicswhileyouwait.com. My physical location of my shop is 105 Fulton Street in Clearfield. And please like and share, and leave me a comment down below and let me know what you think about my potential regular live programs here at Biographics. And I appreciate each and every one of you. Thanks for tuning in.